I was in a power plant, and because of the remote location of this power plant, and now with the COVID, there are less people there. And one of the things that we were discussing with them was, okay, but I want to have now a complete visibility about every components in my plant.
Welcome everybody to the Industrial Security Podcast. My name is Nate Nelson. I'm here with Andrew Ginter, the Vice President of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions. He is going to introduce the subject and the guest of today's show. Andrew, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Nate. Our guest today is Andrea Carcano. He is the co-founder and chief product officer at Nozomi. And we're going to be talking about OT and IoT security, taking that security to the cloud.
All right, here's you and Andrea.
Hello, Andrea. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and about Nozomi?
So, hi, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me. Great pleasure to be here today discussing such an important topic with you. So, talking about myself, as you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and chief product officer in Nozomi Networks. I founded Nozomi already 7 years ago. I have a technical background. I comes from the research side. So I did a PhD focused on industrial control system cybersecurity, working at the beginning on the offensive side, and then moving on the defensive side. And after that, I have the great opportunity to join a big oil and gas company. And I think that's, for my experience was key because, after working in the research side for many years, I have the chance to work for 3 years in the security operations center. So was a great learning phase, let me say. And then after that that was the moment where I started thinking, if I had the prototype that I developed during the PhD, it would be easier to solve some of the problem that we had at that time, right? That is the same problem that today many of our customer has, like visibility, applying cybersecurity without being disruptive on an OT network. So at that time, there was nothing that was really helping me. So I decided that was a good chance to develop something by myself. And that's basically why I founded Nozomi Networks. So that is a quick summary, Andrew, about my experience. Speaking about Nozomi Networks, so as I said, right, we funded the company starting from research and real experience on the business side. And what we do today is basically we have a solution that is focused in providing visibility and protection to what is so-called, OT network and critical infrastructure. So we are offering with our products protection for everything that is, connected to the industrial side. Could be an IT components, could be an IoT components, could be the classical OT components. So for all of those, we have a complete suite of product and services in order to increase and help our customer to increase their, cybersecurity level, let me say.
Our topic today is industrial cloud security. It's taking OT and IoT security to the cloud. And, frankly, a lot of people just don't see those words fitting together, industrial and OT and cloud. How do you see this fitting?
Yeah, that's absolutely understanding, right? And as I was saying before, I come exactly from the same place. I was, the one recommending about, having a full segregation about our OT plans and so on. But I think there is one aspect that is important to underline that is changing on the day by days. So I think the needs of connection between our critical infrastructure and the rest of the network inside a company is changed dramatically. So that is a continuous improvement that we saw year by year. But the interaction between different components in the network and the rest of the network, so OT side and what is so called more on the IT side, it's needed. So it's needed, and we see more and more of that. That is one aspect. The second aspect is that the type of components that are now today part of any type of plant, right? And so specific with Nozomi, we have experience of different vertical, right? We can go from classical oil and gas, rigs in the middle of the ocean, a pipeline in the desert, from a manufacturing plant, from building cars or doing any other type um, of product, and also more broad about transportation, about energy, chemical, pharmaceutical. So in any of these different vertical, based on different flavor and different needs, of course, that all the different vertical has. One of the aspects that we notice is also that the type of device inside this type of network is changing. I think we saw 10 years ago where there was more segregation, less interaction with the outside network. And I think, the majority of the components were tied or what we define today an OT components. So it was a PLC built by an automation vendor, an RTU, a classical HMI or PI, or, there was more classical components that was related to the OT. But there is an evolution now for multiple reasons, for physical security reason, for visibility about what the plant is doing, for monitoring, for being more effective in collecting information. So right now inside a plant like that, we can identify and we can see any type of device. We can see tablet, barcode readers, cameras, VoIP phone, printers, classical computers, running, of course, an important software like an engineering workstation or SCADA master and so on, right? All the different components now are there, and they are together inside what we define OT plans. So going back to your question, Andrew, I think these two aspects are basically bringing the industry to a sort of a new challenge, and open up the possibility of asking to ourselves, is the cloud and the capabilities that the cloud can offer, can the cloud provide to any of this vertical, for example, can provide a better capabilities in order to increase the cybersecurity level. And I think the other important question that we should ask to ourselves is sending this data on the cloud decrease overall the cybersecurity level, or is basically providing some help? And of course, from my point of view, we have a gigantic opportunity, and I believe that it's time to be a little bit more open from that perspective.
Andrew, Andrea may be the first person on this show, maybe the first person I've heard ever, or at least in a while, to speak about the cloud as itself a cybersecurity resource. Now, this is only in my experience, of course, but usually when we talk about cloud, we're talking about it as a tool for functionality, for handling your data, and then we talk about how to secure it. Andrea is saying that the cloud is itself the security asset, which is a pretty new idea to me.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's a little bit confusing here. Andrea is coming from sort of he's immersed in what Nozomi does, and I suggest he said it if you know what you're listening for. But let me add a couple of words to Andrea's answer here. What he's talking about is a security operations center in the cloud. He's not talking about sending, predictive maintenance information out to the cloud and saying that's somehow mysteriously more secure than doing predictive maintenance in-house. He's saying that there's benefits to sending security information into the cloud, into a security operations center. And this is, he talked a bit about what Nozomi does. Nozomi has a product that is an OT intrusion detection and, security monitoring sensor. It's a product that connects to an OT network that gets a copy of all the traffic on the network, that sends information. It extracts information from the packet stream. It sends information into the cloud, and now you have a central cloud a bunch of experts out there, Nozomi experts, who can interpret this information and tell you, how much trouble you're in and, trigger incident response if they detect security incidents in progress. One of the big benefits of this design is that there's really not that much security-wise that happens in an individual plant. Most plants just aren't, even big plants just aren't big enough to have a lot of security stuff going on. And so if you have a security operations center that is monitoring multiple plants, it's much easier to keep a set of experts engaged in that center because they have things to do. They have opportunities to use their expertise. And so this is one of the reasons it makes sense to do things sort of centrally security-wise as opposed to, piecewise, every plant having its own security operations center.
Okay, but as you explain sort of what may have been left unsaid in Andrea's answer, it occurs to me that doesn't sending this data to the cloud just open you up to an entirely new attack vector that you wouldn't have otherwise had?
Absolutely. Cloud connectivity is a concern for a lot of people, and we talk about that at some length later on in the podcast. So I suggest let's go back to Andrea and hold that question, and we'll come back to it.
For example, I was, in a power plant, and I was talking with the people on the plant, and one of the things that they did because of the remote location of this power plant, and now with what's happening today, right? With COVID, they have less people there. They have less physical security there. So one of the things that they did, they actually add, badge access control. And they add lots of cameras in order to monitor critical points inside the plant. So there is now time inside, many of these power plants. I'm talking about a customer that is one of the biggest energy company in the world. And so the majority of the power plants that they add, what they decide to do is to increase their physical security by adding a lot of these components, right? And, now they don't have physical people there, but they're monitoring with that device the information coming remotely. And one of the things that we were discussing with them was, okay, but I want to have now a complete visibility about every components in my plant. I'm worried about a vulnerability, part of my new badge, control system that we implemented since as an IP address. And this is one aspect, but on the other aspect, I would like to correlate eventual information that I get from this device with classical network information because, they believe and we believe they can have a complete view. So the camera goes offline and a person is plugging a laptop inside a specific control room inside their power plant. That is an example of a complete visibility that we can bring and not only monitoring the device itself, that is very important because they carry their own vulnerabilities and so on. But also, we can have a complete view about a potential incident happening in that plant. And I would like to mention a second example. Another example that we saw recently on a customer was on a logistic plant. So as you know, logistics is evolving a lot. Right now, it's completely managed by a robot. So, which is fantastic because, there is a lot of improvement and reducing cost, at least for the company, this is great. And on the other side, the majority of the work that is done by human inside the plant now is through tablet and barcode reader. So the plant is full of this device. And do you know what? They carry vulnerability. We discover in specific on a barcode reader, a super important vulnerability that will be published soon. Today is still considered a 0-day, but will be published soon because there is now a new firmware for that specific component, and that was a vulnerability that potentially can be used for do some movement inside a plant in order to perform an attack. So that's Andrea is just two examples of this evolution that is happening in this industry.
Andrew, with just those examples, I don't quite have the full picture yet.
Yeah, so, Andrea gave an example of correlating information from physical cameras and what's happening on internet protocol networks, IP networks, conventional networks. With a laptop being plugged in, let me add just a couple of words. Imagine that the laptop is a third-party service provider coming in, and they clicked on a foolish website a couple of days earlier, and their laptop has common ransomware on it. And the ransomware has not triggered yet. Sometimes the ransomware triggers the second it's downloaded and encrypts everything. Sometimes it sits there for a while, trying to infect other machines for a while before it shows you that you've been infected. So it's one of these in a sense, sleeper ransomwares. The laptop connects to the network, and the ransomware looks around and says, "Hey, a new network. I've got network shares. I got stuff." It starts going looking around to see where it can plant copies of itself. And all of this network activity might cause a bit of a malfunction in the OT network already. It's certainly unusual activity to see the second that a laptop connects to a network, bang, there's all sorts of network activity, and it's reaching out to file shares. Raises alarms. The central SOC says, "What is this? New laptop, new IP address, lots of activity. Look at the monitor. Oh, there's someone there. They just plugged something in." Raise the alarm, lock everything down, prevent the ransomware from spreading to the rest of the plant, and start taking corrective action. So that's I think an example of correlating information from sort of multiple sources within the plant. Instead of just monitoring the cameras, there's benefit in monitoring everything, so you can put a big picture together.
So I can see that connectivity is increasing. It's been increasing for decades, especially the IT/OT connectivity. But where does the cloud come in? How's the cloud fit in this picture?
If you think about all this new connectivity, as you mentioned, and the new devices coming inside the plant, and this new amount of information that becomes very, very important to monitor and to correlate together. As I mentioned at the beginning, what we do is that we build a software that observe all the different communication and learn how a plant behave, and then bring together intelligence like threat intelligence and the classical anomaly behavior based on what we learn on the system, and in order to raise alert if there is something that is outside from the standard behavior, or if there is something that is that our threat intelligence can identify as a potential threat, someone trying to use a vulnerability or spread a malware inside the plant. And now with this all number of connection increasing inside the plant, with this number of devices that are now part of the OT infrastructure, I think the amount of information is gigantic. And the level of correlation that we can do by running everything's on-prem is just a subset of what we can do by leveraging on the scalability that we can have on the cloud. So I think when you start to break the barrier and having the data flow outside from your plant in a system that have a capability that you will never have on-prem, or rarely, the investment that the majority of the company need to do for having the same capability on-prem will be very high. But now you have access to real-time information. So there is a component of I can in real time observe a behavior and leverage on many other. For example, in this case for Nozomi, where millions of installations all over the world, we're monitoring millions of devices all over the world, and we can leverage on that information to provide real-time contents about potential threats that are happening. So on the other side, when you have a gigantic amount of data, having a capability, having the power to do a deep correlation about that data can really provide a more deep, understanding about what's happening there. And last but not least, one of the things that I'm seeing on any customer, right? I think 7 years ago, there was no visibility. The majority of the customer were discussing and talking with Nozomi about, I don't have visibility. I don't know exactly what I have in my plans. And I need to start from there, right? Because I need to see what I have in order to protect it. So, and that was the first step. So there is still company at that level, but there is company that they did a gigantic progress, and now they have a deeply visibility. But having a deep visibility now means that they have a lots of information. we are working, for example, let me bring another vertical that for us is a vertical where we're working very well, mining, for example. We're now supporting different customers in that industry, and we have one customer, monitoring hundreds of plants all over the world. So the amount of information of all the different assets that they have is gigantic. And sometimes as they have sites that are very, very big. And now the information that I have today are much more than before, also because of increasing of connectivity, as we mentioned, and because there is much more devices at the plant level, devices that before were not there. So for them, it's crucial to have one single point of collection of all this, data in real time in order to correlate also potential communication that are happening between different plants, and identifying eventually an attack that is not just confined inside a plant, but is taking in consideration different plants. And for them, for example, is crucial to leverage on a mechanism like cloud, and to enjoy and to use the capability that you have there in order to consume the data in a better way. And to mention the very last point, Andrew, is that on top of that, you need to spend and use the data in an efficient way. Because when you start to have a huge amount of data, as you know, when you have a lot of information, this means no information. So another things that we can do by using artificial intelligence on top of the data that we see all over different plants is providing actionable information. It is not, one thing is providing the list of all the vulnerability that you have in, between all the devices all over the world. The other things is saying, by installing this patch that is not providing, as far as we know, it's an easy patch to install in these specific OT components, you can mitigate 20% of the vulnerability over, with a CVSS score criticality over 7, for example. So as you can see, now you're an operator, you finally have that deep visibility, but you don't have to, decide the next step alone. You can now leverage on a solution capable to drive you to the next step.
So Andrea's touting that his cloud technology sort of provides real-time monitoring, and that makes sense, but aren't there other technologies, Andrew, that can also provide your plant real-time monitoring that don't require the cloud or are just simpler in general?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll suggest Andrea's main point is not that the cloud provides real-time monitoring and other systems don't. His point is that the cloud provides real-time monitoring just like these other systems, and it gives you other benefits. So one of the benefits he mentioned was scalability. I mean, we could imagine, forget the cloud, we could imagine a security operations center in every one of our, pick a large provider, every one of our 100 power plants. We would need to monitor those plants for security 24/7. We have a desire to do this. What does that cost us? Well, if we got a 24/7 monitoring function in each of these plants, that costs us 5 people, because you've got 3 8-hour shifts in a 24-hour day. You've got another, 6 8-hour shifts you gotta staff over the weekend, and you've got vacations that people go on and occasional sick time. You need 5 people to get 24/7 coverage in each of these plants. If you got 100 plants, that's 500 people you've hired. If you put the monitoring function, the security operations center, in the cloud, how many people do you need? Well, you probably need more than 5, but there's no way you're going to need 500, because there's just not that much that's happening at each one of these plants. And so you can, staff typically one of these sites with 20 or 30 or 40 people, and it's way more efficient monitoring multiple sites than it is having separate organizations to monitor every single site.
It brings me to another question that I had as I heard Andrea. He mentioned that by virtue of this sort of separated global view that Nozomi has, they're able to pick up on cross-site attacks that happen to multiple plants at once. Typically, when I imagine an industrial hack, I'm picturing a single plant. How often are attacks really occurring at multiple locations in the world at the same time?
That's a good question. in my recollection, I can only remember, a half dozen of these kinds of attacks in recent history, and they were all targeted ransomware attacks. So I'm remembering there was a couple of Honda plants that were shut down, one of them for, I think, a whole week. Automobile manufacturing plants shut down by targeted ransomware. Several plants were shut down simultaneously. The bad guys got in, figured out where to plant their stuff, planted it, and shut everything down. Norsk Hydro shut down all of their. They didn't shut down. They switched all of their aluminum plants over to manual operations. They had to shut down a half dozen plants that they could not switch to manual because they were too automated. And I forget the name, but there was an aerospace components manufacturer that similarly got hit with targeted ransomware. They got in and shut down a handful of plants for, I think it was a week or so. So this happens, but what I worry about looking forward, and Andrea didn't talk about this, so but what I worry about looking forward, the need for this kind of cross-site correlation, I think targeted ransomware is just going to get worse. I mean, what I see as the next generation of targeted ransomware is cloud pivoting ransomware, where you might have, he gave an example of these camera manufacturers. The IoT camera manufacturers have a very poor reputation for security. So somebody breaks into a poorly defended, a tiny plant somewhere that really has no cybersecurity to speak of, gets into one of the cameras, breaks into the cloud website of the camera vendor, and now has access to, connections from cameras all over the world, and chooses to target a bunch of cameras in, a dozen power plants simultaneously. And now we have, attack activity coming through the cameras into the power plants. This is something we haven't seen a lot of, but to me, it's the next logical step. And cross-site correlation, I think, is an important sort of forward-looking capability in a security system.
Last question is with regards to how Andrea mentioned creating actionable data, because as you described that example, of course, Nozomi is tracking all of these plants that could theoretically get hit by a targeted attack on a camera vendor all the time, even when they're not getting attacked. So they've got hundreds of data streams. It's sort of hard to comprehend how much data they have to sift through. How is it possible that they even pick up on an attack like this amidst this sort of ocean of information that they're receiving at all times?
You got to look at what kind of information they're receiving, and obviously they have systems in the security operations center to make sense of this information. This is what for 20 years there's been security information and event management systems. Nowadays they call them orchestration systems, but these systems figure this, they help figure this stuff out. They say this is more suspicious than that. But really, Nozomi, what I gathered from his example there, he was talking about actionable information. Attack information is always actionable. I'm under attack. Do something about it. But he also talked about other kinds of information, and there's really two classes of information that you extract from these network packet streams. One is obviously attack and anomaly and suspicious activity information. The other one is sort of security status information. A new patch is released for a particular device, and the Nozomi system gets wind of this. Either Nozomi people enter the information manually, or they're connected to the vendor and they pick up the notifications automatically. And now they can say, okay, I've got a new patch that's been issued. 73 of my 400 sites that I'm monitoring use that equipment. And you can start sending notifications to the owners and operators saying, did you know that you should really apply this patch? Here is the vulnerability that it solves for you. Here is, let's say you're not able to install the patch for a while. Another couple of patches come by, and a consolidated patch comes out, and you can get a notice saying, if you install the consolidated patch, you don't have to worry about these other ones, and you can fix, 13 of your open, 43 vulnerabilities, and it's in a sense helpful information about that you can do things to improve your security posture, even when it's not specific attack information that's being processed.
So this brings us to the question of security. This is the Industrial Security Podcast. I get that there's a lot of benefits to putting data into the cloud, to putting even security data into the cloud for analysis. But, is this connectivity with the cloud for the industrial systems, is there not also risk here?
Yeah, 100%. I think the risk factor is something that have to be considered. We absolutely see that, right? We were, we are coming from a world. We were the one, recommending how important is the segregation, and we didn't completely change our mind and saying now segregation is not important anymore. Absolutely, it's super important, and absolutely, in the moment that you decide to let some data flow outside from your network, you have, some risks that have to be taken in consideration. And in fact, our recommendation is not to just, open up completely the connection between, an OT networks and between the cloud. It's important to make sure that we select the data that are flowing outside the network. And that's why, as Nozomi, we believe on the fact that there is some risk in any case by sending data on the cloud. The benefit of cybersecurity and visibility that the customer can get back is absolutely higher and justifying, the risk of sending data up to the cloud. But on the other side, we believe it's important to mitigate that risk by putting in place solution that will be very helpful. For example, one of the things that we just announced and then we really believe as Nozomi is fundamental is a partnership with Waterfall. So because as we say, one thing is sending selected data up to the cloud for analysis, but it's also important to monitor and making sure that there is no direct path between internet and the plant. And how I can do that? A solution like Waterfall can, come in play here and providing a very important role. So Nozomi can still provide this increased value as we believe by having data on the cloud. But on the other side, we can mitigate a lot the risk of having the data flowing outside the network, and most of all, having other data or connection that are not allowed, landing on the plant.
So, Nate, let me jump in here. This comes back to the question you asked earlier in the episode about the risks of connecting to the cloud. We want to increase security by connecting to a cloud-based service provider, but is not every cloud connection also a risk because it's out on the internet? And Andrea touched on it here, but let me expand just a bit about the Waterfall partnership. Yes, I work for Waterfall. We are partnered with Nozomi. The way the Nozomi system works is you've got sensors that are connected to mirror ports on industrial switches, and they get a copy of all of the network traffic on those switches, and they analyze that traffic for useful security relevant information. The thing about these sensors is that they have to send alerts and other status information into the cloud-based security operations center, and the easiest way to manage these sensors is to put them on the IT network, where you can apply security updates, you can log into them, you can manage them easily. It's you don't want to be logging into the OT networks all the time to be managing these sensors. The problem is if you do that sort of easy solution, the solution that makes everything easy to manage, now the sensor's on the IT network and it has a connection back into the OT mirror port, and these mirror ports generally are bidirectional, or they have the ability to be bidirectional. And now we've got a new path for information to go back into the OT network. This is not a good thing. So if you want to use the sort of the easy management solution and you're concerned about the unidirectionality of your mirror ports, you throw the unidirectional stuff, Waterfall's unidirectional products in between, and now we can monitor those mirror ports, and it's not physically possible to send anything back into them. The hardware, the unidirectional hardware just can't do that. So that's the longer answer about your question about, is every connection to the cloud not a risk? And the answer is no, not if you've got some unidirectional hardware in there protecting the OT system that's being monitored while you're sending status information out to the cloud.
So that all sounds good in theory. In practice, though, I've heard end users say things like, look, our strict policy is no cloud connections from OT networks ever, period. You know, how do industrial users, respond to this cloud imperative?
Yeah, we have a customer all over the world, right? And this is also my experience. We have many customers that are embracing this new opportunity, and other customers that maybe they have an internal policy that was decided and they don't have any capability to change in the short period that policy. In some other country, remember, as Nozomi, we have deployment, all over the world in all the different continents, and there is countries where there is a law or a policy that basically make impossible for them, because they're classified as critical infrastructure. They make impossible for them to send data up on the cloud. So that is absolutely a potential problem. And my answer is that this is understandable. Every time I talk with CISO and CIO in different industry, my answer is that we understand it, and my belief, my vision is that is going to change, because we have now the capability to leverage on the cloud, by, as we said before, by not increasing too much the risk level there, actually overall reducing it. And but on the other side, I think every company will start to identify that also in this sector, like it was in many others, doing that will overall provide benefit. It's going to take time. It's not going to be for everyone at the beginning. And as Nozomi, we are going to, as we usually do, we're going to, be focused on what the customer wants. This is our culture for the beginning. For us, supporting the customer is the main goal and the main mission. So this means that if the customer is ready to move on the cloud, we will support that with our new product called Vantage. But if the customer is not ready, as we can still support them with an on-prem installation and doing our best to make sure that even if we're on-prem, they will get the most out of it, and they will get as much as possible, intelligence and visibility as they're doing today, right? Because as a reminds, we just announced our cloud product, but we grew up as a company providing cybersecurity on-prem, because that was, the stage where we started 7 years ago. So, short answer, Andrew, we're going to support every type of customer, depending of their needs. But also my vision is that if we're going to have the same conversation in 3 years from now, we will see that the landscape and the evolution will go through using more the cloud 100%.
Waterfall Security Solutions is the OT security company, and we are pleased to announce the Waterfall Industrial Security Institute. The Institute is a YouTube video series focused on industrial cybersecurity education and solutions. The first chapter of episodes features the top 20 cyber attacks on industrial control systems. Understanding attacks is vital to designing robust cyber defenses. The Top 20 series introduces enterprise security practitioners to industrial operations concepts, while introducing engineering practitioners to cybersecurity offensive and defensive concepts. The Institute is making the first 3 of 20 episodes in the chapter available at launch. Number 1, ICS Insider. Number 2, IT Insider. And number 3, Common Ransomware. Please subscribe to Waterfall's Industrial Security Institute at youtube.com/Waterfall Security Solutions.
Something there, harken back to what we were discussing earlier about sort of the savings benefits of doing this stuff in the cloud, that, for example, you don't need at least 5 people at a plant so that one of them can be monitoring it at all times. That's expensive. You probably need much more than 5. What Andrea just said is it makes sense that for manufacturers, whoever it may be, who aren't ready for the cloud or for whom regulations get in the way, you could use, as he sort of termed it, the on-premises solution. But we just finished talking about all of the benefits of the cloud and how on-prem is sort of costly and maybe inefficient. So do you not lose all of the benefits that we've spent this whole episode talking about if you do this sort of on-prem traditional way of doing it?
That's a good question. Andrea did not say these words, but it's my understanding that when Nozomi does an on-prem solution, they're not talking about deploying a security operations center in each of 100 power plants. They, in my understanding, they generally talk about deploying the on-prem solution at head office, and it's on the IT network. And so now you do still have some of the scalability benefits. You can be monitoring your 100 power plants centrally. You don't need 5 people per power plant. You can have a smaller number of people centrally. You do lose some of the scalability benefits because you don't have all of Nozomi's experts working for you. You have, you don't have all of the infrastructure for, the ability to correlate information across customers, the ability to build up a large critical mass of expertise in the cloud. But you do have a smaller mass of expertise at head office monitoring your plant. So that's it. It's not that it's local or cloud. There is the in-between solution is still central, but constrained to a single owner and operator.
I do see a lot of organizations slowly moving to use more and more cloud services on the OT side. In your experience, how is this evolution going? Are there industries that are further along? Are there geographies that are further along? What is your experience in cloud adoption?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because I think as we mentioned before, there is an evolution going on, and you mentioned absolutely what I believe are 2 key factors in cloud adoption. One is the vertical, where a specific customer is belonging to. There is vertical that are more friendly than others, and the other one is the country. Let me start with the country by giving some example. I think there is countries like, Middle East, for example. We have a big office in Middle East. We work there in different verticals. But overall, I think it's pretty common for the majority of the customers that are there to be a little bit more sensitive on the cloud part. They have policy internal and also recommendation from the government to make sure that the data are not flowing outside from their organization. So of course I will see, for example, that part of the region be a little bit more strict on that. We're recently discussing with the CIO of an important water company in Australia. And for them, they're open, they're embracing the cloud, but they have also some restriction about, having a certain certification attached to the product that are living in the cloud. This is the first question. And the second one is they want to make sure that cloud is okay, but cannot be a cloud that store data in Asia, for example, or in America. So they want to make sure that the data stay local, even if they are on the cloud. So that's, for example, is another policy. I see United States, especially because also United States, I think there is a lot of trust in who is providing, cloud infrastructure. I see in specific here in United States a huge adoption. I see the customer more mature in general to move on the cloud, and that's just to mention a little bit of countries, right? And I can keep going. We can discuss about Germany. We can discuss about France, Italy, Switzerland. So because at the end of the day, there is a combination of culture and policy for each country that are changing a little bit. The other aspect that you mentioned and is fundamental is the vertical. There is vertical that are naturally more mature to embrace the cloud. There is other vertical that are less mature, and they will do that, but they will require time. Manufacturing, I see the manufacturing going super fast. Manufacturing, telecommunication, transportation, smart cities. In my experience, this is some of the vertical that are leading with that. They're doing, they're moving quickly. The healthcare industry in general, they embrace cybersecurity even much more due to the fact that COVID, changed a little bit our behavior and our doing stuff. And also they are embracing, the possibility to have data on the cloud. And so I think if we move on, for example, oil and gas, oil and gas, I think, is an industry also for the very remote nature of their business. And in some cases, there is infrastructure that was built 30 years ago, plant rigs in the middle of the ocean, pipeline in the desert. I think also in also country that have an internal regulation. I think I see for this big company in the oil and gas that they need to face different challenges. First of all, for example, I have a plant that is in a country that doesn't allow me to send it outside because the critical, even if I'm an American company, my plant is living in a country where there is some regulation there. So as you can say, Andrew, I think we can clearly identify some pattern in terms of country that are ahead of others and in terms of verticals that are ahead of others. Um, but in general, also there we will see an evolution over time.
So this has been very good. Is there another topic you'd like to touch before we sign off?
Absolutely. I think we discuss until now about how and about mainly how is we're getting benefit by doing that. But let me dive in a little bit more concrete and giving you a real example of one installation that right now is focused on leveraging on the cloud. But and let me explain exactly what they did. So we're talking about a customer, first of all, based in the United States and gigantic, monitoring a lots of plant on the manufacturing vertical. So they start by installing what is called Guardian Sensor. What is Guardian Sensor? So I think that is the base when we want to apply this type of approach. And inside Nozomi, for us, the Guardian Sensor is an appliance or is a virtual machine that can be virtual or physical that can usually is plugged in to the existing network inside a plant. So we collect data through the mirror and span port of a switch. So we don't need to, we're not disruptive at all for the plant. That's is fundamental. How many seconds of downtime do we need for install that sensor? Absolutely zero. By design, the network is configurable in order to provide this type of data. So installing the sensor is the first step, and this customer was an Nozomi customer for more than 1 year now. So they already have Guardian Sensor installed in their critical plants, more than 100, and they were collecting the data locally. So for them, the second step that they did is fantastic. I want to now leverage on the power of the cloud. So they're using a gateway for having the data going outside from the plant. Very easy, just a rules configured in their firewall, configure the gateway properly, and then having the data going outside, from the plant and configure in order to be sent up to the cloud. And that's it. So they don't have anything else to do. The infrastructure is there. There was no downtime. Was very easy. And now they're leveraging on the power of the cloud, and they're already providing a lots of concrete value. And let me, be very specific here. So what is some of the value? So as I said before, actionable information. They're getting patch level of every different device because that's where we're monitoring. So an important thing to mention is that the data that we're seeing is real-time traffic, is real-time network traffic. So we monitor, to be a little bit more technical, we go to the level 2 physical level, to the level 7 application layer. And we see from a MAC address going up to the IP level, going up to the application layer. We understand every single aspect of that communication. We understand if there is a ping coming from one IP to the other versus a commands that exchange an important value inside the plants. So we can get all that data. We can understand how the data are usually flowing inside the network and identifying potential pattern that can, that can, for example, be used for an attack or so on. So on top of that, in terms of visibility, we get important information that complete our cybersecurity level. As when we protect an house, it's important to see if there is someone inside the house that is doing something that is wrong, but I want to know also my components inside the house. Are they secure? Do they have any weakness? And that is fundamental. So if we use this analogy in the network, This means how many patch are installed in my device number one. Can be a Windows machine, can be a camera, can be a PLC from Honeywell, Rockwell, Schneider, Simsi, Siemens, and SCL, so and many others. So, which is the firmware level? How many patch do I install there if there is a patch? And how many vulnerabilities are well known for this specific device with this specific firmware? So is there any communication that is trying to use one of those vulnerability that I identified in that device? This is under just some more concrete example for basically say how we are going to do that and which type of concrete information are becoming visible right after we plug the system inside the plant.
So Nate, what struck me there was the zero downtime, and a lot of times when we're installing security technology like antivirus systems or different kind of firewalls, there's a risk of disrupting normal operations, and you need to make these changes during scheduled downtime. When we're talking Nozomi, when we're talking passive network monitoring, I just wanted to remind people that what they're doing is connecting their new systems. There are new devices or virtual machines or whatnot involved. They're connecting this new stuff to a mirror port. And for anyone not familiar with it, a mirror port is a special port on a network switch. I mean, the cheap network switches, I have a network switch, under my desk right here in my office. It does not have a mirror port. The switches you tend to see deployed in industrial installations or even, big IT installations, instead of, 5 or 10 or 12 ports, they'll have minimum of 24, often as high as, 96 ports. And they have a CPU inside, and you can log into the switch and configure the switch. And one of the things you can say is, on that mirror port, I want all of the traffic from these 17 ports, but not the rest of it. So you can configure the mirror port, and by default, the mirror port's off. So you come in with the Nozomi sensor, you connect it to the mirror port, you log into the switch, and you say activate the mirror port, and now the Nozomi device is getting the copy of the packets. And so, yeah, you didn't have to shut anything down. The mirror port wasn't being used. You plug into the mirror port, you haven't disrupted anything. You log into the switch, you haven't disrupted anything. So that is one of the beauties of passive network monitoring. If you have a switch that's capable of mirroring traffic, and most of the modern installations have these higher end switches, you just turn it on and you're good. Zero downtime.
Is there a thought you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, that was a great chat. Thank you, Andrew. I think, the summary, the final thoughts that I want to, have as a key takeaway from the chat that we had today is, the importance of, cybersecurity is fundamental and is fundamental to, be very cautious about every move that we're doing. But I think here right now, I see that there is an opportunity to think a little bit differently and try to embrace something that we consider not good until yesterday. And because overall, if we start to see the big picture, and if we do that correctly, we can overall increase in the entire world the level of the cybersecurity level of our critical infrastructure. So I think that is the main takeaway. And of course, if there is anyone that just listened to this chat is interested to discuss it more, of course you can go on our website and request for a specific meeting. But on the other side, on top of what we already share, one of the things that we like to do as a company is connecting, is helping the community. So we may already working with another customer in the same industry as you. So, just remember that also as a company, we like to connect people. So you may listen myself telling you how much is important and how the customer X did it. But we always like to put together, different stakeholders and say, hey, you can listen the experience directly from that person. So feel free to be in contact with us, because we're happy also to organize this type of roundtable and make sure that you listen not only recommendation, not only coming from myself, but also coming from, customer that already did and already through that journey.
Andrew, you got a last word?
I do. I mean, what I'm taking away here sort of reinforces what I'm seeing in the industry personally. At Waterfall, we work with a lot of different kinds of customers, and the two kinds of cloud connection, the two kinds of, sort of cost benefit arguments for connecting to the cloud that we see the most commonly are, predictive maintenance that we've talked about many times, predicting when we need to take equipment down and service it, and cloud security. This is one of the top two cloud features, cloud facilities that we see even the most cautious industrial sites beginning to use. I mean, Andrea mentioned manufacturing. They might have as many as 50 or 100 cloud connections in a typical, automobile or washing machine manufacturing plant. But even in the most cautious industries, we see predictive maintenance connections to, power plant turbine vendors and security providers. So, I think the lesson here is the cloud is coming even to the most cautious sites. And this is a classic example of the kind of cloud application that even the most cautious sites are investing in because there's just enormous benefit in it.
Okay. And with that, thanks to Andrea Carcano for speaking with you, Andrew. And Andrew, as always, thank you for speaking with me.
Always a pleasure, Nate. Thank you.
This has been the Industrial Security Podcast from Waterfall. Thanks to everybody listening.